Hey everyone, what's going on? In previous videos, I had talked about how Marilyn Manson was used in the predictive programming of the Stoneman Douglas High School shooting on Valentine's Day. And I also mentioned how it's connected to this big space theme that is going on in the media. Even Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, the lady the school was named after in Jewish gematria, equals 1969, which is the same year that Neil Armstrong walked on the moon. It was the lunar module called the Eagle. The Eagle landed on the moon. The Stoneman Douglas Eagles, it was right after the Philadelphia Eagles won the Super Bowl, and much, much more. It was synced up to the number 108. Marjorie Stoneman Douglas supposedly died at the age 108. And then we had Anthony Rizzo, the Chicago Cubs player, who supposedly went to high school there. And remember, the Cubs won the World Series in 2016 for the first time in 108 seasons, and much, much more. But the reason, think about Chicago Cubs. Chicago was where the 1929 St. Valentine's Day Massacre was. And earlier in this year, we got the death of Chester Bennington, the lead singer of the band Linkin Park, right? And he died on the day that the Eagle landed on the moon, the 48th anniversary of the Eagle landing on the moon, July 20th. And the St. Valentine's Day Massacre in Chicago, it happened in Linkin Park. And that's what I documented clear back in the summer. Also, just before the Stoneman Douglas shooting, we had the Falcon Heavy launch that was synced up to David Bowie. They used David Bowie's songs Life on Mars and Space Oddity on an endless loop in Elon Musk's Tesla Roadster and whatever else, and in Gematria, David Bowie equals 49. His real name even equals 49 in Gematria. Tesla Roadster equals 49. Starman equals 49. They had a mannequin named Starman. Space Oddity equals 49. Life on Mars equals 49. It was the 49th launch of Falcon rockets. David Bowie died 2 years, 27 days before that launch. 227, the 49th prime number. Remember, just after David Bowie died, we got the death of Glenn Frey of the band The Eagles. Eagles equal 49. And a bunch more things going on with it. So I was following some stuff with Marilyn Manson because clear back in September, Marilyn Manson had mentioned that Columbine ruined his career. And he did that on September 24th, which just so happens to be the Stoneman Douglas shooter's birthday. Nicholas Cruz, he was born on September 24th in 1998, which was also the same year that Marjorie Stoneman Douglas died. And she died exactly 19 weeks before this kid was supposedly born, and he was 19 years old. The 19th prime number is 67. Valentines in Gematria equals 67. Nicholas Cruz equals 67. The Cubs they won the World Series exactly 67 weeks before this shooting, beating the Cleveland Indians. Cleveland Indians equals 67. Anthony Rizzo was supposedly born on August 8th, 8/8. If you go from that day to Valentine's Day, it's a span of 6 months and 7 days. Lots and lots of other stuff going on with it. But Marilyn Manson, he comes out with a story September 24th talking about Columbine, and then this shooting reminds us of Columbine. And remember, he got injured just after this on September 30th when the big 2 gun props fell on his leg and supposedly broke his leg or whatever. So they were showing us guns there. I also want to point out his Heaven Upside Down tour that he was on. It began on 7/20, the same day that Chester Bennington of Linkin Park died, the anniversary of the Eagle landing on the moon. And then Marilyn Manson missed a bunch of concerts, and he came back for one show in the United States, and he went to San Bernardino, California, which was the same day as the Sutherland Springs church shooting that I had talked about, how I was following this Stand By Me theme that the media was doing. And then I talked about how it was missing Kiefer Sutherland, and then we got the Sutherland Springs church shooting just days after I mentioned that. And Marilyn Manson, on this day, on his concert in San Bernardino, he was made the mainstream media because he brought out like a fake gun, and he was pretending to shoot it or whatever, and he also had a gun microphone. And people said, why would you do this on the same day we get the Sutherland Springs church shooting? Also in San Bernardino, where in 2015 we got a shooting as well, a famous shooting. So they were showing us guns yet again with Marilyn Manson. And if you look up Marilyn Manson's Heaven Upside Down tour, or that album, it was supposed to come out on Valentine's Day of 2017, and then they bumped it up to October 6th. So if you're new here and you don't understand what I'm talking about, check the links in the description. You'll understand more of what I mean when I say it equals a certain thing. But it's gematria, which is the practice of coding numbers into words and phrases, that stems back to Jewish mysticism, which is called Kabbalah. And you can look it up. David Bowie studied Kabbalah. Marilyn Manson studied Kabbalah. Some of the members in Marilyn Manson were even named after concepts of Kabbalah. Marilyn Manson also has a song called Valentine's Day that was released on his album called Hollywood, that was a rebuttal against all of the media scrutiny against him for, Columbine and the Columbine shooters. They were saying that he was part of the reason that these kids shot up the school in Columbine. And he made this whole concept album called Hollywood as a rebuttal to all of that media scrutiny, right? And he has a song called Valentine's Day on there. But a quick lesson in gematria. Marilyn Manson's new single on his album is called Say 10. Say and the number 10, right? And he says, you say God and I say 10. The reason that he says you say God and I say 10 like a number is because in gematria, God equals 10. And also Satan in the other way, the opposite way, equals 10. It's all about duality, and it goes back to thelema and whatever else, as above, so below. That's why the Freemasons, in their lodges, they have the black and the white checkered board. It's all about duality. And think about the band Slipknot that has the song Gematria, the killing name. And they also have that famous song called Duality, These people are in the know. These people know what's going on. This system is absolutely being used by people who rule over us. And, they're using this knowledge to rule over us. And we need to learn this knowledge and put it into it, So anyway, all of that being said, today, I woke up and somebody had left a comment on one of my videos, and it was something I did not know before. David Bowie actually has a song called Valentine's Day that came out in 2013. And when you look up the song, it even talks about how in the music video, he has visual hints towards gun violence, and the NRA were also noted, suggesting the video was conveying a subtle anti-gun message. So he has a song called Valentine's Day where he hints about gun violence and conveying an anti-gun message. And then we get the Stoneman Douglas shooting on Valentine's Day of all days. And it's synced up to Marilyn Manson, who was showing us the Stoneman Douglas high school shooting that's synced up to the moon. And David Bowie was just recently in the news again because of all of the Falcon Heavy stuff. Also, another reason that Marilyn Manson is so connected to David Bowie is because David Bowie just so happened to be Marilyn Manson's ultimate influence on his music. David Bowie, his biggest influence was David Bowie. If you look it up, even on Wikipedia, it says that. Let's find it here. His biggest influence, however, was David Bowie, whom he credited with changing his life forever. Right? So David Bowie, Marilyn Manson's biggest influence. So they're absolutely connected. They both practice Kabbalah, whatever else. It's all synced up to a space theme. I looked up the song Valentine's Day as well. It came on this album The Next Day by David Bowie. It came out on March 8th, 2013, which is interesting because that's the 67th day of the year. Remember, Valentine's equals 67. The next day in Gematria equals 45. Valentine's the 45th day of the year. Also, something that I noticed when I was looking this up is that Anthony Rizzo, the Chicago Cubs player, who was born on 8/8, which is an important day to Chicago. You know, Curse of the Billy Goat equals 88 in Gematria. That's why in the Steve Bartman incident, if you look up the Steve Bartman incident, it was in the 8th inning, and after that, the Marlins scored 8 runs in the 8th inning to come back and win the game. The Cubs were in their 88th season at Wrigley, a bunch of other stuff with it, you know. Synced up to the number 88. I even talked about the movie I Pet Goat on YouTube. That's super predictive programming. And they even have the pink lotus flower that opens up and whatever else, reminding us of love and Valentine's. But up on the chalkboard in that film, they have evil. It's supposed to be evolution, right? Evil TN. And then it has, that equals 88. It's missing the I, the O, and the U. That equals 45 in Gematria. Love, and I talked about how evil is backwards love. It's love in reverse and whatever else. And you know they were using the Chicago Cubs in that film because it begins with the goat coming out of the deal, and then they have the baseball lights right up on the top. So just watch the first like 5 seconds of it. You'll see the goat come out, and then the baseball lights turn on. So, and then it has, you know, Obama is the one who starts sweating, and Obama was politically out of Chicago. But what I wanted to point out, August 8th is also the day that leaves 145 days in the year. Chicago, Illinois equals 145. The year the Cubs won, they were in their 145th season being called the Cubs, and it was 145 years after the Great Chicago Fire that began on 10/8. Once again, that 108 number. If you write out 145 in Gematria, it equals 108. The moon is supposedly 108 moons away from the Earth. Geometry equals 108, because all this goes back to mathematics. The guy who founded geometry was Euclid. Euclid equals 108. 108, a super important number. Baseball, I believe, equals 108. Or maybe just Major League equals 108. Or 108 double stitches on the baseball. Also, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas died on 14/5. And the mayor of Chicago during the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, he was born on 14/5. And if you write out St. Valentine's Day Massacre at Gematria, it equals 145. The word Catholic equals 145. Valentine's was created by Pope Gelasius, it equals 145. Jorge Bergoglio, the current pope right now, his name equals 145 in Gematria. And it makes sense. 8/8 is a specific day. Pope Francis is the first Jesuit pope, supposedly. And August 8th is also the 220th day. And lately, we've been getting stories that are connected to the space theme in regards to Trump and presidents from other places. We had a story about Putin and the missile, which reminds us of the Cold War, the space race. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But we also got the story about Donald Trump and the Mexican president who was born on July 20th, the day the eagle landed on the moon. I'll get into that in a second, but August 8th is the 220th day, and Donald John Trump in Gematria in reverse equals 220. Donald Trump went to a Jesuit university, Fordham University as well, and he was super synced up to Pope Francis and whatever else. His birthday is 187 days apart from Pope Francis's. In Gematria, the Society of Jesus equals 187. And, you know, his birthday is 187 days apart from the Jesuit Pope. His national convention began in Cleveland on 18/7, and it was 187 days before he took office. And also, Donald Trump's 70th birthday on Flag Day, which was important to the kneeling during the national anthem that I had talked about all year. I talked about Charles Manson and his helter-skelter theory about the blacks rising up, and how it was connected to the NFL season. And then, of course, Charles Manson dies in November. And before that, on September 23rd, the big day with Pope Francis coming to America in 2015, Donald Trump called out the NFL about not standing during the national anthem that was synced up to Philadelphia. It can be written 23/9 even, the date, 9/23. And the flag was supposedly sewn at 239 Arch Street in Philadelphia, and a bunch more. 2015, when Pope Francis visited the United States, it was the 239th year of the United States. And it was also the 333rd year of Philadelphia, and Philadelphia Eagles equal 333, just pointing that out. But anyway, in regards to that day, Pope Francis came to America on his 923rd day as being the Pope, and the next day he went to the White House on 923, and all the media pointed out that he arrived at the White House at 9:23 in the morning, right? 923rd day. It was also the 266th day of the year, and he's the 266th Pope. Earlier in that year, we got the movie Trainwreck, and we also got a Philadelphia train wreck even before that, and it was supposedly happened at 9:23 p.m. And then the movie Trainwreck, the movie begins with Amy Schumer's character being 9 years old, and the rest of the movie takes place 23 years later. And LeBron James is a star in that movie. That equals 923. And the same day Trump called out the NFL, LeBron James called out Donald Trump or whatever. So go back and watch that. LeBron James called out Donald Trump, calling him, can't remember what he called him. He, you bum or something like that. I have a whole video on that. I'll try to find it and leave in the description. But also in that year, on Donald Trump's 70th, well, it wasn't that year. What was it? Trying to think. 2016, on Donald Trump's birthday, which is Flag Day, Donald Trump turned 70 years old, and it was also Pope Francis's 1,189th day of being the Pope. And think about that in regards to the King James Bible, the Freemason Bible, that has 1,189 chapters. Donald J. Trump in Jewish gematria even equals 1,189. Pope Francis arrived in America at 4:04 p.m. There's 404 verses in Revelation. It was the 404 years after the King James Bible was created in 1611. And think about how that ties into LeBron James, whose nickname is King James. And in 2016, they won the NBA Finals on the real King James's birthday. King James in satanic gematria equals 404. So just wanted to point out that Donald Trump, the Pope, they have this big connection. It's connected to the Jesuits. Donald John Trump in gematria equals 220, which is synced up to a date with Chicago and Catholic and whatever else. The Pope Francis's birthday is 2 months, 20 days after the Jesuit anniversary. It was also 81 days after, and then he turned 81 years old this year as well. The Pope who created the Jesuits was the 220th Pope as well. And he also died at the age of 81. And I talked about how in 1929, that was the year that the Vatican City became a sovereign nation. And there was also some type of war, I can't remember what it's called, it starts with a C, in Mexico or whatever, that was in 1929. And that Pope was also died at the age of 81. So possibly we'll see Pope Francis die this year. Maybe that's what it's pointing to. But it's just interesting, now we're getting the story about the Mexican. We got the story on February 25th, I believe. Let me see here. Yeah, February 25th is when we got the story. The wall comes between them about the Mexican president and Donald Trump. And notice his birthday, like I said, the day the eagle landed on the moon. And his name in gematria equals 45 in two forms. Donald Trump, the 45th president. If you go from his birthday to the day the media reported this story, it was 220 days, and supposedly in the article, the phone call that they're talking about took place on February 20th. 220, it was about the Mexican border, that equals 220. Then, on March 1st, wasn't it? March 1st, we got the story about Vladimir Putin. March 1st, and he boasts military strike with animation of Florida nuke strike. Just think about that, where the Stoneman Douglas shooting just was. You know, Chicago Cubs, they supposedly beat Miami in Back to the Future. This was all in the Miami area. The Miami Dolphins story with Jonathan Martin. The bullying scandal just came back up again. And whatever else, showing us Miami. And I just want to point out, this story that we got about Putin doing this came 220 days before his birthday. And his name in Francis Bacon gematria, where capital letters matter, that equals 220. So his name in Francis Bacon 220, just like Donald John Trump. This story came 220 days before his birthday. And it's interesting, last year, around the time of the NBA Finals, I was talking all about the Houston Rockets and the huge space theme that was going on. And then I talked about the priest, all the priests in my town or whatever, because I was watching South Park, and it was the 87th episode of South Park called Red Hot Catholic Love that equals 87. And it was about Catholic priests molesting kids or whatever. The 87th episode, the word priest equals 87. Red Hot Catholic Love, the title of that equals 87. If you ever seen the movie Spotlight with Michael Keaton, it's about exposing the 87 priests in Boston for molesting kids. They do that on purpose. That's what the whole movie was about. They want people to know about Catholic priests molesting people or whatever, but they don't tell you that it's coded by the numbers. I just think about the Catholic Church in regards to the Jesuits. What I wanted to point out is that, think about all the space stuff and whatever else. Back around that time, the reason I mentioned that was because the priest who supposedly we joked about had molested me when I was a kid was Father Fitzgerald, and his name in gematria equals 87. I can't remember what it was. Howard Fitzgerald equals 87 in gematria. And I don't know if I was really molested. We've just always had this inside joke. But he got kicked out of the church after 35 years being a priest for molesting some kid around this area. And I don't know who it was or whatever else, but we always knew he was a child molester. And the word Catholic in gematria equals 35, and he got kicked out after 35 years. So it's absolutely coded by the numbers. But his name, Father Fitzgerald, and then we got the USS Fitzgerald crash story in the media just, a week after I had talked about Father Fitzgerald and how something was important to Fitzgerald. We got the USS Fitzgerald story, and it was super synced up to the number 22 and also 220 that was synced up to North Korea. And just think about North Korea in regards to missiles as well. Missiles, rockets, space. Now we got Russia kind of bringing back the Cold War with their missiles, rockets, whatever else. But back around that time, I even mentioned, I wonder how the Jesuits are connected to space and whatnot. And remember, the Jesuits have this telescope, the Vatican telescope, and it's even named Lucifer. Why would the Catholic Church, the Jesuits, have a telescope called Lucifer? Doesn't make any sense. Lucifer in gematria equals 74, just like Jesus, just like Muhammad, just like Cross, just like Joshua, just like Yeshua. Important number. Even the director here, the guy who supposedly directs it, Guy J. whatever, however you say his name equals 191, just like Society of Jesus. And he's a Jesuit. And this is a Jesuit telescope named Lucifer. And what's funny is, while I was researching that night, I read the word Lucy, and right when I read the word Lucy, I heard the TV say Lucy, and it ended up being this show with this guy in it. And the character that he plays in the show, his name is Josh Greenberg, which I thought was funny because if you've been following Zachary K. Hubbard on YouTube, when they really started attacking him to begin with, before it was Greenblatt, they tried saying that he was this guy named Josh Greenberg. And I just thought that was funny, so I kind of looked into it more. I was like, interesting. The character's name is Josh Greenberg. And whatever else. It was all about the number 67 in this. It's connected to Valentine's Day. Let me find it here. The last episode was on the 67th day, and I talked about how this guy was also in the movie This Is the End. That equals 67. Revelation equals 67. And this film, This Is the End, the film This Is the End came out on Donald Trump's 67th birthday even. So, I don't know. I just thought that was funny. I wanted to share that really quick. And in regards to the Mexican president or whatever, later on that night when I was researching, I went to ESPN to look at some of the scores. And ESPN kept changing everything to Spanish. I couldn't figure it out, you know. And Christopher Columbus, who I was following as well in regards to the space theme, because of the flat Earth, all the flat Earth stuff that's going on YouTube and wherever else, Christopher Columbus, you know, we're told about the flat Earth. And then Kyrie Irving comes out and says that he believes in the flat Earth. Well, the guy who popularized the flat Earth was Washington Irving. That's why we got Kyrie Irving. But I just want to show really quick how ESPN changed everything I had to Spanish for whatever the reason. Like every time I would try to do anything, other than that one page, it would turn everything into Spanish. And I couldn't figure out why it would do that, you know? I would click on translate and then it would switch back, but I don't know why. Like, why would ESPN, you know, it just doesn't make any sense. So I just wonder if there's something going on with Mexico and whatever else with, I don't know. I follow some of these signs sometimes as well, and it leads me to certain things. You know, that's how I figured out some of these puzzles, by the synchronicity that goes on for a reason. It also reminds me of Joe Rogan's, one of his stand-up comedies where he jokes about Mexico having an air force or something, but, you know, I don't know. There's something special to this number 220, and how it's synced up to the Jesuits, how it's synced up to the space theme and everything that's going on in the media. There's a big tribute to the moon this year. We even had the Great American Eclipse. And we had, I just talked about the article in the media about Jim Kelly, the Buffalo Bills football player whose cancer came back, and his father died on the day of the Great American Eclipse. And we got the story about him getting cancer again on the night of a full moon. Full moon in Gematria equals 108 in frontwards and backwards. Right? The moon 108 moons away from the earth. And Buffalo is important because the Buffalo Bills started their string of their Super Bowl losses in 1991, the year the space race came to an end because the Soviet Union dissolved. Marjorie Stoneman Douglas equals 91 in Gematria, just like space equals 91, just like rockets equal 91, just like asteroid equals 91, just like Apollo equals 91, Apollo, the missions that landed on the moon. 91, an important number. So anyway, I hope you get what I'm talking about, how our media is absolutely coded, and they use these themes, and they put out certain stories at certain times connected to people's birthdays because it connects to certain numbers. And if you figure out the code, we can figure out what's going to happen next. And we can, you know, figure out how to put an end to this tyranny that we live in, and all of these bad things and all of these lies. And we can get back to, you know, living the way that the world should be living, and not under some control of people ruling over us. Before I end the video, I just want to talk a little bit about the date of 4/5, because it seems like it's an important date to what's going on. It's also connected to some synchronicity I had over a year ago in regards to David Bowie. But even before that, I just wanted to point out another thing with 220. If you write out 220 as words, it equals 77, and also 239. That year special to Pope Francis, the word Christ equals 77, just like 220. You know, Putin's up for re-election on 3/18 this year, which is the 77th day of the year. This is supposedly the God number. If you ever watched the TV show Touch with Kiefer Sutherland, and his son can see how everything is stringed together in the world and whatever else. It's all about the red string of Kabbalah and some other stuff. But the God number begins with 318 and it ends with 318. And there's supposedly 318 mentions of the return of Jesus in the New Testament. You know, so, and it's the 77th day, and Christ equals 77. That story of Putin also came 145 days after Putin's birthday. You know, remember how 145 and 220 are significant, obviously, because they're mirror days or whatever, but just wanted to point that out really quick. So the date of 4/5, I find interesting. Well, let me explain a little bit, and then I'll explain why 4/5 is important. Because everything about Marilyn Manson that I was talking about in October was important to the number 10 because we had the JFK files being released 10 days before November 5th, which was also the Sutherland Springs church shooting. And it was also 144 days after Donald Trump's birthday. And JFK died 144 days after meeting the Pope. And Donald Trump met Pope Francis on the 144th day of 2017. Now, the first president to die in office was William Henry Harrison, who died on 4/4. If you read out 44, it equals 144. Think about Abraham Lincoln dying on 14/4. It's a number that's connected to political assassination all throughout history. JFK even died on the first day of Sagittarius. Sagittarius equals 144. His brother, RFK, supposedly died at 1:44 in the morning. JFK, also the 35th president. Remember the word, he's the only Catholic president. Catholic equals 35 in Gematria. He was the 44th term president. 44 equals 144. A significant day. So I was talking about 10 days before was important because that was the day a bunch of other stuff, but 10 days before, I believe even equals 144 at Gematria. But 10 days before, 144 days after Trump's birthday, they released the JFK files, reminding us of political assassination and whatnot. And in the Marilyn Manson song, Say 10, in the promo, it was all about the assassination of Donald Trump. And then it was, Say 10, and then he didn't play any shows in the 10th month and whatever else. David Bowie died on the 10th day of the year in 2016. And once again, God equals 10, Satan equals 10. There's 10 Sephiroths, or however you pronounce it, on the tree of life, and what they are used for is basically a way to understand God or whatever. So there's 10 of them. It's the way God reveals itself to the Ein Sof, the infinity, whatever else. It's the way God reveals itself through the 10 Sephiroths. So it's fitting there's 10, God equals 10. Our number system is based on, it's 10 base or whatever, 0 through 9. Marilyn Manson even has the song called Coma White with his then girlfriend Rose McGowan, where they reenact the assassination of JFK in that video. And just think about her name in regards to Valentine's Day, Rose McGowan, and whatever else. And someone pointed out to me there was a film called Parkland, where the Stoneman Douglas shooting was. But there's a film that's not about it, but it's a film about the JFK assassination called Parkland, which is interesting. And JFK was assassinated 54 years ago. The word love equals 54. And I pointed out that 4/5 this year, April 5th, or 5/4, it's 10 days before 144 days after the 54th anniversary of JFK being assassinated. So it's 10 days before 144 days after JFK was assassinated, right? So that 10 days before is important because of the files being released 10 days before, if that makes any sense. 10 days before is important. Trump, the 45th president, Valentine's Day, the 45th day of the year. Trump even met Pope Francis 316 days before 4/5 this year. Jesus Christ in Hebrew Gematria equals 316. I believe it even equals 10. If you look it up in Hebrew, Jesus equals 10 in one of the Hebrew forms. And also 316. The death of Charles Manson, who Marilyn Manson got half of his name from, and he also got the other half from Marilyn Monroe, who supposedly had the affair with JFK, right? Think about it. Then Charles Manson dies, but Charles Manson, his real name, Charles Mills Maddox, equaled 316. And what did he die? I can't even remember. He was born on the 316th day of the year, and it was like 3 months and 16 days after the anniversary of the famous killings that he had, something like that. Trump also met Pope Francis 266 days before the Valentine's Day shooting. 266 days, the 266th Pope. 9/23, the 266th day, the day that was important to all of the kneeling during the national anthem that went back to Charles Manson and his helter-skelter theory about blacks rising up, right? I also pointed out that 4/5 then, it's the day that Kurt Cobain died. And He also has ties to David Bowie. Remember, he covered the song The Man Who Sold the World. In 2015, I was talking about Kurt Cobain and how he is super connected to Valentines and love. His birthday also, February 20th, 2/20, right? That 220 number. And I just talked about him, tons of stuff with him and love. He was married to Courtney Love. He had the song Heart Shaped Box, Love Buzz, and so on. A bunch of stuff that was synced up to love. And his middle name's even Donald, which reminds me of Donald Trump. Who knows, you know? But in Jewish gematria, his name equals 614, like Flag Day, right? Herbert Hoover even equals 614, which I talked about was big too with the stock market crash and whatever else. And, you know, tons of stuff that's synced up. It's all with the number 88. US Bank Stadium equals 88. Neil equals 88. Colin Kaepernick 88. Star Spangled Banner 88. You know, and remember what I talked about in the beginning of the video with Anthony Rizzo's birthday on 8/8. And Trump in gematria, just the word Trump equals 88. HH, Herbert Hoover, 88. The stock market crash happened in the same year of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Anyway, in 2000, or maybe it was 2016, yeah, I have a post on 2016 on September 30th about Kurt Cobain and how I had some weird synchronicity with the song The Man Who Sold the World. And remember, 9/30 this year was also the day that Marilyn Manson got injured in New York City when the gun props fell on him. And just a year prior, I talked about Kurt Cobain in synchronicity to David Bowie that same day, 9/30. And think about it. Marilyn Manson getting injured in New York, and then Kurt Cobain, he did this song, The Man Who Sold the World, on Unplugged in New York. So, I don't know, just thought that was interesting, something connected to New York on the same day, and it's connected to Marilyn Manson, who's connected to David Bowie, and also Kurt Cobain, who's connected to David Bowie and connected to Valentine's Day. The Man Who Sold the World in English Extended Gematria equals 1963, like the year JFK was assassinated, which I thought was interesting. So I just pointed that out. I even pointed out David Bowie died 2 years, 1 month, and 4 days before the Valentine's Day Massacre. 214, a lot like Valentine's Day. Smashing Pumpkins even remade Space Oddity in 2013, the same year that David Bowie came out with the song Valentine's Day. And just recently we got the stories about whatever this girl's name is, Darcy Retsky, however you say it. She wasn't invited to come on the new tour or whatever. There was controversy between her and Billy Corgan and whatever else. That was like mainstream media articles right around Valentine's Day, you know? So how interesting they would even have the Space Oddity remake. Just thinking about the grunge era, Smashing Pumpkins, Nirvana. So who knows? 4/5 might be a day to watch out for. We'll see if we get any media stories connected to all of this love Valentine stuff. 4/5, it makes sense. Valentine's the 45th day. I'm not sure. I just throwing it out there, trying to figure it out because there's some weird synchronicity that was showing me Kurt Cobain. It's connected to the number 45 and that date, 4/5. Even syncs up to that 220 number that I mentioned earlier. So one last thing I'll point out really quick in regards to Kabbalah. When you look up Marilyn Manson, it talks about how some of the concepts in his albums or whatever and band members, it was named after the Isaac Luria Kabbalah, which is like modern Kabbalah that's practiced. So I decided to look up this guy. He's supposedly the father of modern Kabbalah. In Satanic Gematria, his name equals 444. David Bowie equals 444 in Satanic Gematria. Jesus Christ equals 444 in Sumerian Gematria, just like cross, just like Masonic, anything that equals 74. So Lucifer equals 444. You know, Muhammad equals 444. Just interesting that they would have them numbers. I even talked about how right now we're in it's 33 years after the anniversary, the 444th anniversary of the Jesuits. It'll be 34 in September this year, 2018, but right now it's currently in the 33 years after the 444th. Think about Jesus dying on the cross at the age of 33. And LeBron James was born 3 months and 3 days after the 444th anniversary of the Jesuits, and he's 33 years old this year. So, and his name's King James. There's something significant to it. Something really significant to LeBron James. I even pointed out the guy, Isaac Luria, died on 25/7, which is the 55th prime number. God equals 55, Satan, heaven, numerology, Garden of Eden. They all equal 55. So who knows, I guess, We'll end it there. There's something going on with how David Bowie is interrelated into all this. There's a big space theme that's going on in the media. Hopefully you're following what I'm saying. There's a lot more to it. They're interrelating a lot of different things. And if you pay enough attention, I don't know. We're going to figure this out. We're going to piece this all together, and we're going to start calling these out every single time before they happen, so more people will wake up to the lies, and more people will become aware, and we can devise a plan, and we can take this world back. So have a good one. Peace.